Fantastic. So yeah, I thought, rarely do we get a chance to have two such esteemed brand folk in the room. So this is really an opportune time to ask your specific brand questions if you have them, anything you're struggling with your business or where you're hoping to go. Obviously, you can keep it anonymous if that's helpful. But if you do have any questions, do we have any burning ones we want to start off with from the audience? Anybody?
I'll start.
Oh, lovely. Yes.
So yeah, Jonathan Leaf. I used to run an agency. Well, for both of you, mainly Stephen actually, how frustrated do you get with clients who just want results there and then, and they're looking at the stats and saying, where are my sales? What are you going to do about it? Do you feel that's got worse over the last few years, or are clients starting to realise that actually long-term investment in brands is actually a worthwhile thing to do?
I think generally speaking, a lot of the clients I work with are bought into brand as a concept. They do want short-term sales. So it's not a case of, don't worry about it. This is all going to come right in the next 2 to 3 years. But there is definitely an expectation, particularly when I'm working with brand marketers, that they're leading up to something. It's not just that this campaign has to deliver this thing. It's a transformation. It's a project that's going to last us several years. It's how do we build the associations that the customer base should have with our brand, because that doesn't happen overnight. A lot of the time in client organizations, it's very siloed. So you do have a team who is reporting monthly, weekly probably, who's going to question, why is this up and why is this down? And you've got a team who's really kind of thinking a lot more long term. Most of the time, yeah, they all line into the same place. There's a CMO who's in charge of those things. But for the most part, those CMOs tend to be a little bit older. They tend to be from a place where brand was the thing, and actually performance marketing still feels pretty new for those people. So there's certainly pressure, but I wouldn't say that it's coming so much from marketing departments and the clients that I work with directly as it is coming to those marketing departments from CFOs, etc. So it's always up to us as an agency to help those brand marketers to make that case on an ongoing basis. It's never just like, we're going to do this and then you're going to get it. It's you need to get it, sure, but actually you need to really help the rest of the business to get it as well. And that's our role on an ongoing basis, to just be that voice who's continually backing that up.
And I think just to add to that, I think it kind of depends where the CMOs have come from. So, I think we are now in an era where people are able to develop products individually. The speed to market is a lot quicker. So we've got lots of very clever technical people able to create products who are used to seeing day-to-day iterative changes of performance marketing and of what they're working on. And so I think there's perhaps, you talked about the kind of older, more set in their ways, kind of old school kind of marketers. I think there is a kind of newer school who perhaps are being re-educated as to the value of brand. And that is happening. I think that is happening. Maybe 10 years ago, I think it was probably broken a little bit. But seeing the value of both long-term brand investment and the short-term performance marketing, I think is becoming more standard.
Anybody else with key burning questions? So if not, I think, should we spell out really what differentiates brand activity versus activation? Do you guys have some clear definitions of or activity that would qualify each?
Fuck.
Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, I think some classic activation marketing would be stuff like sales promotions. It's pay-per-click. It's stuff that's call to action based, where the end result is to buy now. Whereas brand, it's about having an understanding of a brand, having a feeling towards a brand, and that's not a fluffy thing. We know that emotion helps build brands, and that doesn't mean that it makes everyone feel warm and it makes everyone feel happy, but you have an emotional response to a piece of advertising or a piece of content. It's much more likely to be recalled. It's much more likely to build salience. So, there is you can have performance marketing that creates brand to an extent, but actually it's much more likely to operate the other way round, and that's been shown by our mates Les Burnett and Peter Field again. So I think that's where I'd identify it. Stephen?
I think there's a point about formats as well, because when you're doing video, for example, it's a lot easier to get across a range of messages. And so there's only a few channels, in my opinion, that really you could do both of these things on. Social media being one of them. You can do direct response and you can do brand building on a lot of social channels. And TV is another. You can do the really emotional Christmas campaigns like a John Lewis does, and you can do the here's a sale at DFS stuff, and both of those things work equally well. Where it gets a little bit more muddy and really where it stops working is when you have channels that are very clearly one or the other. And PR would be a good example of this. It's very difficult to do direct response PR unless it's just product stuff and you're getting your product featured in a list of 10 more products about the best products about this particular category. That works. That is never going to build a brand, but that works from a direct response point of view. For the most part, PR campaigns, anything that you probably call a campaign, is usually brand building stuff. And likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, PPC, it's very difficult to build brand through PPC, apart from just, generally getting the brand name in front of people for extended periods of time. But it's not going to build brand, it's just going to capture more of a market that exists. So for the most part, format's a big clue. I would say video is one of the ones that really sort of helps you to do both of those things.
Just to add into that, there's been some research recently. So going back, 4 or 5 years, you'd get the grumpy old buggers in the industry like me, sort of, actually I started out as digital, I shouldn't be saying like me, but grumpy old buggers in the industry saying you can't build a brand on digital channels. Now, Stephen said that's not the case, and format is key. And that's been shown recently. So Dr. Karen Field, I was going to say Kite, Dr. Karen Field has done some research around format, about the performance of digital TV, in effect, video, how it does correlate with TV, which we know TV is the most effective advertising channel. All of the studies show it, but you can get similar effects from digital now.
Please do shout out if you do have questions. Otherwise, I will keep going with some that we have from previous. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
When you talk about different channels, different agencies have different slices of the pie when it comes to brand. You guys are setting out a strategy and the direction for a brand. How do you tackle different agencies going off in different directions? Because you can see it pretty jarring on certain campaigns that don't feel right for a brand. I've certainly come across it working with agencies. So how do you guys tackle that with the client as a brand strategist?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of you that might not have heard, different agencies have different ownership of channels and of budget. How do we manage that for kind of brand effectiveness ultimately? And I think the thing there is, I think there's been a problem in agency land going back for quite a while now, and it started with the separation of creative and media, because what that means now is that you've got creative agencies fighting for their share of the market and sometimes overselling creative. Now, we know that the most effective campaigns are long-term campaigns. Adverts don't wear out. Marketers get bored of adverts. The consumers don't. And that's been shown through studies. And so creative agencies are incentivized to do more work. That's not effective. That's not good. But that's all they can do now because media has been separated. And now media is also now separated from, kind of specific channels, above the line, below the line. And it's really difficult. I think certainly when I've been brand side or even working at agencies where we kind of work with media partners, we've always tried to work with, those that are multi-channel. So, I've always been kind of channel agnostic. So I was able to create my own way of doing it, but it's difficult. We kind of almost need to re-educate on this specific topic. I think we need to educate marketers more on this so that people aren't just being kind of going where the largest shout is. And I remember kind of in my earlier days, kind of as a digital marketer, and this wasn't pay-per-click because I'm older than Google, you can tell, look at this face. But we'd be battling for budget with the PR team. We'd be battling for budget with the media team. And ultimately, the client wasn't educated enough really, and that's not a criticism of any of those. I had some wonderful clients. but they're not educated enough really to say, no, I only need this much of this and this much of that. And I think that is still a problem. And unfortunately, I don't have the answer, but I recognise it. I'm glad you brought that up.
So I would say someone is in charge of the brand. It's either the client or one of the agencies, but there's no such thing as a democracy in marketing. It's called a committee. It's very difficult to democratically let lots of agencies and lots of marketers kind of come to a conclusion that's in that general direction of a brand. There's loads of reasons for this, by the way. One of the pressures, of course, is we want to start executing. We want to start doing stuff. And a lot of the problems can be mitigated by that strategy up front, which is, it's difficult to sell in because you're going to spend a bunch of time not really feeling like you're doing a lot, but you're really understanding, you're really defining a direction. And you're always going to have some agencies. And by the way, digital PR is like the worst for this, who think, do you know what? Brand doesn't apply to us. We can do anything because that's what get links, that's what journalists want. And then you've got other agencies like, we can do anything because that's what works on that channel. And it's very frustrating when you're very early on in your career that you feel like handcuffed by these brand guidelines, but they're there for a reason and someone needs to enforce them. It can be the client, and a lot of the time it is, but often it's one of the agencies. We just need to kind of decide who it is and pay some respect to them, really. One of the challenges, of course, is if not everyone is bought into them and understanding the purpose of them. The easiest solution politically is to give everything to one agency, and that's what a lot of brands just kind of do. Like, I give up, you do everything, and then it's all joined up and we can deal with that. But a lot of the time, we're getting more and more clients who are setting the overall strategic direction of their brands in-house. It's not outsourced to the TV agency. It's done by the senior marketers in the organization. And they have those specialist agencies who are looking to execute that on social, on PPC, on all these other channels. Logic would dictate that the fewer places are doing that, the easier it is to keep everything joined up. But really, it just comes down to leadership and someone really just being the bad guy, I think. Often it's the client, but it's not always.
I think just on the back of that, do you want to talk a little bit about what brings the cohesion together? So especially if you're talking around different channels, that overarching, because I think sometimes, especially when brands are growing, some people do think it's just a logo or maybe it's just a colorway or whatever. So is there a little bit to be said about what kind of assets that we're talking about here?
Yes, I mean, I think when we talk about brand, the most important thing is to be distinctive and memorable. And that could be a color. It could be as simple as a color. It could be a mascot. It could, and I forgot to come back to this earlier, it could be a ridiculous hat. So, the reason I mentioned the hat, and I know there's a couple of people here, James is here somewhere, who are familiar with my hat because it's such a ridiculous hat. It was an accidental purchase that people then recognized, and like, okay, I need to stick with this now. It's become a distinctive asset. And so having a distinctive asset allows you to shortcut people. So I think that's important, much, much more important than a brand. So, a proposition that people can understand and something visually that they will remember are important. But when I think it comes to the cohesion, it's about everyone understanding what needs to be effective. And Stephen shared a brilliant slide earlier about how effectiveness increases with the use of more channels. And obviously that will plateau at a certain point. But if everyone's on board with actually creating an effective campaign and keeping the client happy, you need to understand your place in that. And where I think that often works best is either when there is someone that takes control, be it the client or a lead agency, or actually more often these days when you have a comm strategist. So the comm strategist will oversee all of the different channels, and then you'll probably get a channel strategist as well because people love strategists. But a comm strategist will look at the best makeup for a particular campaign for a brand.
Analytics hold us back so much as an industry, right? Because analytics feels like the answer to a lot of problems, data. And I'm specifically pointing at Google Analytics, but it's true of lots of analytics platforms, Adobe, whatever. They tell us what has happened. And they do tell us, generally speaking, what's happened. They tell us less and less about it because they obscure more and more data, and attribution across channels is impossible. It's like, et cetera, et cetera. So they don't really tell us what happened, but we feel like they tell us what happened. And then the next layer above that is, why did it happen? And there's a couple of different directions that can take. You either say, you guys are the experts, you tell us why it happened, and someone somewhere, maybe at an agency, goes, it's probably this. And try and back it up with the analytics because they can, because it's really easy to reverse engineer those numbers. They go off and do that. The answer usually is actual talking to customers. And, we can take the form of what John was talking about earlier, a brand survey, actually asking people, why do you feel the way that you feel about our brand? What don't you like about it? What do you like about it? That can go all the way through to web performance, where we're like literally doing user testing research, whether it's focus groups in that format, literally user research, heat maps and that kind of thing, or whether it's asking customers. But the subjectivity is removed so much when we actually just ask people who would be the right kind of people to buy something from us, what they think, why they do what they do. The real challenge is we think of data as being the answer, and it's just like the first part of the question. You process that data into something to make it useful, and that processing can be either done by those proper qualitative, quantitative research, or it could just be done by us having a guess. And unfortunately, I think we usually just do that bit and just say, yeah, you're a UX designer. Tell us what's gone wrong. And yeah, I think it's probably because it's blue and it should be red. That kind of thing happens all the time. So talk to users. That's probably the thing to unite behind, I think.
Amen.
Amazing. Anything from you guys?
Yeah, just one observation actually. When I started out in advertising, absolutely creative-led everything, and media buying followed what the creative wanted. How do you feel that's changed? And do you think that's changed for the better or worse?
Yeah.
I'm going to use an analogy from football because I always thought that these things were cyclical, and it's like it goes from media to creative, back to media, back to creative, and these things kind of just happen. And when we're talking about attribution being so much more difficult and getting more and more difficult, and ITP blocking stuff on Safari and all these kind of things, ad blocking, making it very difficult to do this, you feel like, oh, it's going to go back to creative, it's going to go back to broadcast. And you feel like these things are cyclical, but I think actually they're just competing ideologies. And there are people who think each of these things all the time. And actually you can, in my previous agency, for example, we built a big business just by saying, do you know what? Creative's the answer. And enough of the market agreed with us that creative was the answer, that we were able to do something with that. You're always going to have clients that are going to be one way or the other. And it's really just about not trying to appeal to everyone all the time. If my previous agency, Rise at 7, we were fond of saying if we wanted to work with HSBC, we'd look like HSBC. We look like Misguided because we want to work with Misguided. If we'd have rocked up to HSBC, we would have probably laughed out of the building because we just looked like a bunch of kids. It looked like the Wolf of Wall Street was wild. So you've got to just pick your battles, segmentation, you could call it, but really just deciding this is how we do things, this is who we do it for. And you know what? If you don't match that profile, maybe you're not for us. You can't appeal to everyone. And generally speaking, like clients, I have different conversations with my clients now. We do work with HSBC, although I still wear a hoodie, but we do work with HSBC and we talk a very different language and we look a very different way and we approach problems from a very different angle.
I think it has changed, and I don't think for the better. I think obviously creativity was the way, and then we sold media on the top of that, and that's where we made our money, incremental money from media, and that's where we can be effective. We can keep reusing the campaigns because we're not clawing to make adverts all the time. But I think we're now in an era where kind of marketing effectiveness, marketing science, whatever you want to call it, is re-educating people about the value of creative. And there's been a lot of talk recently about the value of creative. I can't remember who it was now, but when they did the research showing that a dull ad needs 10 million more on media spend than a good ad, and System 1 are doing a hell of a lot of really good work showing the value of emotive creative advertising. So I think kind of that's becoming more of the discourse. But I think the other thing is that a lot of people in marketing, agency side and client side, have no training in marketing and actually have no concept of some of the more important things in marketing. And that's always been the case. You know, I'm an architect. I studied architecture before finding my way into marketing. But we're getting, I think there's more value now in training for marketers. You've got things like the mini MBA, CIM. Scott Galloway's got a course. Sir John Hegarty has got a course now. Grace Kite is doing a course. And all of these things where they're talking about effective marketing or effective advertising are putting creativity front and center as the hero. So I'm hoping that as this education into what marketing does and how it actually works with humans, more people will understand the value of creativity and invest more in that. Now, one of the things that was really interesting over the last year or so, if anyone's seen the Tourism Australia ads, absolutely fantastic, award-winning. Now, what they did there was they deliberately put all of their creative budget into the first year. They spent a ton on creative, on kind of talent, on CGI, and created a series of brilliant ads that they were always planning to run for 3 years. So the whole of year 2 budget, the whole of year 3 budget is just media spend. And it's creating a much more effective ad, but they invested in the creativity up front. And I think that maybe is a better model.
Is that the Crocodile Dundee one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's the one after that.
Oh, okay. I'm too old to go. Right. So I think also, I think it's great to have Pepsi money for brands like Pepsi. But what about smaller brands? What kind of incremental gains do you think? Where would you suggest that, in terms of brand activity, would you have any recommendations for where people start investing to make their case to invest further?
Social media is like much more accessible for most brands. I mentioned lounge underwear and influencers. Influencers generally are really just another media channel. If you think about influencers as the exact same thing as being as a TV channel, it's like they have an audience and I'm paying to get in front of them. The cost of an influencer, not talking about Kim Kardashian, but the right kind of micro influencers that have a captive audience that are probably the right kind of audience for the brands that we work with, that's so much cheaper. And likewise, TV, it feels very expensive, but with things like Sky AdSmart, with things like ITV and streaming services, being able to advertise on what is now TV, because that is TV, right? Just because you're not on ITV during the X Factor final doesn't mean you're not doing TV. Actually, since Amazon Prime has started doing advertising on its platform, it is the biggest TV channel, and yet it's so much cheaper than being on Channel 4, for example. So, video on demand and streaming services feel a lot more accessible, again, than linear TV generally does. But, social media is probably the cheapest. PR is another one, and it's the same sort of deal, right? You're trying to get in front of a larger audience, and the way that you do that is by getting on the press who have a larger audience. So it's about creativity, but using those channels and leveraging the audiences they already have.
Yeah, social media obviously is a quick to market channel, and it's about how you use it. And that's the thing. It's kind of, you can use it for pay-per-click, and it's obviously not as tight bottom of funnel as kind of Google advertising, for example. But it is creating visibility for a brand. Video of any sort, even kind of free to air video. I did some research recently in cybersecurity. So B2B, very specific, actually really quite safe, hygienic, and let's be honest, dull advertising. But what they were all doing was using LinkedIn to do content. So they were creating white papers, they were creating kind of surveys, and that creates awareness. So even on almost zero budget, you can use these channels to your benefit. And kind of, video is great. Video is great. The reason that Marisa talked about my bin juice. So I do a video series every couple of weeks where I just sit in front of some bins and talk about marketing. Why in front of bins? Because no one else is sitting in front of bins. It's mindlessly distinctive. I looked at what everyone else in my game is doing, and it's all kind of leaning across desk or some people walking down the street. I thought, no, I'll do something memorable. I'll call it bin juice because it's visceral and actually disgusting. And I'll sit in front of bins wearing a hat talking about marketing. Now, it gets views, it creates salience, people know me for it. And also with video, it's actually quite easy to pump it out across different channels. So I spend very little time on my video content, maybe 2 to 4 hours every fortnight. And I put them out to YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, because why not? Twitter, because why not? And I'm not calling it X, screw you, Elon. And TikTok. And they all get views and they all create some kind of salience, and it's all about marketing, it's all about what I do. And it costs me nothing but my kind of internet connection. So whatever you can do to be memorable and visual and distinctive is going to help. And if you've got some budget to put behind it, absolutely fantastic. What I will do is I'm going to make the case for 2 things that we haven't talked about. One is direct mail. Everyone is used to getting, I'm sure all of us here are used to getting bombarded with crap spam mail, really poorly thought out cold sales email, and the same on LinkedIn. And I still use both of those channels myself for my clients and myself. But what people aren't getting is something in the post very often. So something creative in the post, maybe a mocked up newspaper I did recently for an AI training company. It lands, it's seen, it's remembered. And the other thing that's actually not as expensive as you might think is digital out of home. So billboards out of home have always been hugely expensive because there's a lot of printing, there's a lot of kind of stuff getting put up there. You can actually, for pretty low money, get a share of a digital out of home piece, which if you're working in a particular area or there's an event going on where your target market is going to be, is a really good use of money. And again, it's not something that most of us think of doing.
Yeah, I love that. Those are great examples. Is there anything else, or we'll start wrapping it up? Anything critical? I mean, I'd love to end on, I see. Michael, what is it?
What's the best example of a brand ad and why?
A brand ad and why? So what's the best example of a brand ad and why?
Favorite.
Do you have any favorites?
Stephen, you're not allowed to use John Lewis.
We didn't make it.
That was Les. So talking about distinctive assets, autoglass repair, autoglass replace, sticks in your head. Absolutely brilliant thing that they run for years and years and years. The other one that I really, really love is the Hovis little boy ad, which ran in, 60s and 70s. And then I think it was Lucky Generals got hold of the account and they brought it back, and they had a kid basically running through the decades up until now. And they re-brought back the brand with as Hovis, as good as it's always been. And I just thought that was a wonderful piece of work.
I'm going to do a cop-out. And I'm going to say the compare the market meerkat ads. And there's a reason for that. Firstly, the way that those ads came about is because of Google search data. They realized that people were accidentally typing meerkat instead of market. So it's an SEO-led campaign, right? The second thing that I love about those campaigns that really sort of goes to show why distinctive assets are so interesting. The reason that Alexander Orlov, the meerkat, is Russian is because the creative director who pitched the account got a South African accent wrong. He couldn't talk in South African accent. He accidentally talked Russian. They're like, we like that. He's Russian now. So these kind of things that you really do associate with compare the market. The fact that he's a fucking Russian meerkat, completely accidental and totally irrelevant to the brand. But they build over time. There's loads of examples of this that just don't have to really line up with anything. Why is a gorilla playing drums to Phil Collins in the air tonight, right? No reason, but it works. It's about just building something that's just mindlessly distinctive.
Do you remember when everyone was saying fucking simples? Simples. Again, that's off the back of that ad. It entered the lexicon. Absolutely amazing piece of work.
So really just be distinctive, be memorable, yeah? All right, well, I think that probably concludes the Q&A for today. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our Power Hour 11, yes. And again, making it here today. A big thank you to the sponsors, so Lexus Hell and Creative Growth. Please go see the Lexus. Please go talk to Andrew and his amazing team about that fabulous program. And otherwise, that concludes our Power Hours for the year. So again, we'll be back in the new year with brand new fabulous content. And a huge thank you to our fabulous speakers. Thank you very much, guys.